The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
This week, Tbilisi hosted the Georgia-Austrian Business Forum, and B2B meetings between the businesses of both countries have been held.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between Austria and Georgia. And 30 years of diplomatic relations also mean 30 years of economic relations, and those relations have developed quite dynamically. But of course, the COVID pandemic has created quite a dip, and we want to use the opportunity of this anniversary to discuss with our Georgian friends how we can deepen our economic relations, how we can re-engage, how we can restart our economies after the COVID crisis. We have a very important trade mission here. High-ranking representatives of the Austrian business community are here in Georgia to have B2B talks with their counterparts, and they're all sitting in here now, and we're trying to discuss not only what was good in what we did in the past, but also how we can explore our potential in the future. Because, as I just said, inside Austria and Georgia are a natural fit. We are countries of a similar size, same topography. We have mountains, so there's quite a number of natural points of departure where we can intensify our cooperation. And that's the goal of this meeting today.
I think we are getting back to business forums in Georgia, which is quite significant. And it's an annual event, so we used to host this kind of event at least twice per year. And now Austrian delegation is represented by very interesting sectors, such as hydroelectric powers, tourism sector, also we have packaging sector. So I think there is a very big interest from Georgian business. As you can see, there is quite a lot of businesses represented, and such events have quite significant impact on trade economic relations between countries. And I think it's a very good, let's say, it's a very significant event that it's live. Because while pandemic had very destructive effects regarding face-to-face communication between business, our members, we have more than 3,000 members, and it demonstrates that they miss this live face-to-face communication. While online communication is still very significant, quite a lot of business ties are made here on the spot during this face-to-face meeting. So I think this particular business forum will have a long-lasting effect, which will further contribute to trade economic relations, cultural integration, and we always used to say that if there is even small portion of contracts made between these companies, it has a very big impact if you take into general scope, because 1, 2, 3 success stories attract 10, 20 more. So these small steps are very significant in case of this big picture.
First of all, I am indeed delighted to be here wearing no mask and seeing people actually smile in person. And I do think that interpersonal touch is something that's very, very important. Events like this bring businesses from Europe, Austria, and Georgia together, and I think are critical for Georgia's future growth. The ability to transfer knowledge, share experiences, look for investment opportunities, I think will greatly benefit Georgia, and if I may also say investors abroad as well, to learn from the Georgian experience. And so it is with this, and I'm pleased to be here at this event that organized by the Austrian Embassy to celebrate 30 years of the embassy here in Georgia.
Business forums are always very important because you bring the people together. And after this long COVID time, it's more important because the people want to speak to each other, see each other, and so on. And then, online you can do a lot of things, but it's important that you sit down on a table, look into the eyes, drink a tea, and from there you can only develop business. Business is a people business. And that's why we are very happy to have 15 companies again. And I can feel already that they are developing projects, and this is very nice to see.
The Austrian delegation comprised up to 15 Austrian company representatives from different sectors. I attended the business forum and will tell you more in detail about the expectations, challenges and perspectives that both Georgian and Austrian businesses see in terms of cooperation, exports and investment. Both Georgian and Austrian chambers of commerce see certain sectors as more appealing to doing business in Georgia.
The Austrian company is active in many sectors, and many are also active in Georgia. We heard about the regional development and tourism and agriculture. And from the one side, we have this Austrian Development Agency and the Austrian businesses who have ideas. And we have, in a concrete way, two companies here. We're doing applications for regional tourism development to make it more interesting for tourists. And so this is really in a very concrete stage already, so I'm very optimistic. But we also have hydropower companies who are here, machinery, equipment sellers. So there are quite a few who are trying to develop new projects here.
Let us be more precise. What are some of the sectors of the economy that you see that have the most growth potential with these ties, better trade ties with Austria?
I think we have several companies represented from hydroelectric power sector, and it is very significant, especially taking into account the political situation and encouragement of small hydroelectric powers in Georgia, because it is very significant aspect of energetic independence overall. And there is quite a lot of Georgian companies that demonstrated interest, and here we have both analytics and intellectual property as well as technical part of it. So I think it has a very big potential to introduce high quality consultants and technology into Georgia, especially in view of, as I said, significance to the energetic independence of Georgia overall.
However, for doing business in Georgia, Austrian investors have their preconditions. Here are some ideas on what could make Georgia's business environment more appealing.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between Austria and Georgia. And 30 years of diplomatic relations also mean 30 years of economic relations, and those relations have developed quite dynamically. But of course, the COVID pandemic has created quite a dip, and we want to use the opportunity of this anniversary to discuss with our Georgian friends how we can deepen our economic relations, how we can re-engage, how we can restart our economies after the COVID crisis. We have a very important trade mission here. High-ranking representatives of the Austrian business community are here in Georgia to have B2B talks with their counterparts, and they're all sitting in here now, and we're trying to discuss not only what was good in what we did in the past, but also how we can explore our potential in the future. Because, as I just said, inside Austria and Georgia are a natural fit. We are countries of a similar size, same topography. We have mountains, so there's quite a number of natural points of departure where we can intensify our cooperation, and that's the goal of this meeting today.
What are some of the sectors of the economy where you see the potential growth?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind obviously is tourism. And tourism infrastructure. I mean, as I said, mountainous regions, cable cars, hotels, sustainable mountain tourism. These are all areas where we are engaged, Austrian businesses, but also the Austrian Development Corporation. And this is an area where we can still strengthen and where also Georgia needs to recover from the COVID crisis. Other areas include energy, logistics, but we have also some Austrian brands here that are represented. So it's quite a broad portfolio and quite a huge potential.
Yes, and one more question, please. Sorry. This first the pandemic and now this Russia's devastating war in Ukraine has been real tough on trade. So, what are some of the must-haves in economy for Austrian businesses and Georgian businesses to really have win-win situation in this trade relations?
Well, as you pointed out, I mean, I mentioned before the COVID crisis, but also, of course, the war in Ukraine has created a lot of anxiety and insecurity, and this is something that we need to overcome. When you talk about what is important for us, I think talking to Austrian companies, there are mainly two things. First of all, they need a skilled labor force. This is an area where we need to can cooperate. And the second one is, and you will not be surprised because this is a message that the EU constantly gives, is we need rule of law, reliable judiciary. This is important for a good business environment.
But I think in general also what we see is that they're looking for stability, political stability, predictability in the economic policies, and as Georgia is a very liberal country and is moving towards the EU and we have good laws here, so I think this is a very good precondition for Austrian companies to do business here.
The Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development, Levan Davitashvili, tried to reinforce this very precondition for Austrian businesses in his quite a long address speech. I will try to summarize the most important points that Mr. Davitashvili shared with the audience.
The EU integration process will also support cooperation and strengthening of our friendly relations between Austria and Georgia. As you all are aware, in March, Georgia applied to EU membership and already submitted answers to EU questionnaire. The EU candidate status will be prerequisite for more integration of Georgia to EU, and of course it will help and contribute a lot development policies, increasing connectivity, which will of course unlock new opportunities for Georgia's economy.
The Minister of Economy also shared the main policy priorities of Georgia with the Austrian guests and business community, assuring them that these reforms would make the business environment even more appealing for doing business in Georgia.
The main economic policy direction of Georgia is to support the strengthening of international economic relations with EU countries, to redirect trade and investment flows from Russia to EU and US, of course. Recently visited the United States. We raised a very important topic to continue negotiation on free trade, and hopefully we can progress in this direction, and of course use at maximum level our free trade and free and comprehensive trade agreement with the European Union. Recently, Enterprise Georgia has launched a very important export assistance complex program to support Georgian businesses to increase export capacity. This is co-financing so-called like marketing activities in like entry fees, other kind of marketing activities, listing, licensing, certification costs, etc., etc. Our trade turnover is not impressive, and I think that with Austria we have definitely bigger potential to increase trade. Export is really very low, but I think that Georgia has a number of products which can be identified and further promoted to be exported to Austria. From Austria we have around 60 million US dollar export to Georgia, and here as well I see potential to increase in all directions. This can be industrial products, consumer products, etc. For ensuring productivity, enhancement and structural improvement of our economy, several structural reforms are now in a process in the medium term. These are comprehensive reform of state-owned enterprises, development of the capital market. These are my priority areas. Improving information technology, IT sector in general, IT infrastructure with special priority, of course, on digitalization and digital development, not digital transformation, but continuous digital development of the country.
Digital development is a goal that is also supported by the World Bank. Its regional director, Sebastian Molenius, says new reform priorities will help Georgia maintain and even enhance the resilience of the country's economy.
Much of what we do at the World Bank is to enable private sector-led growth. For that to occur, that means that the private sector has to be vibrant. So we work with government to make sure that there's an appropriate investment climate, that businesses can operate freely here, that you have strong competition, strong market-based and rule-based system, justice system, etc. These are all things that we have been supporting Georgia with for over 30 years now. And I can safely say that there's a very strong investment and a business climate here in Georgia that allows for this very dynamic growth to occur that we see here. If you look at the last 10 years, pre-COVID, Georgia averaged over 5% of growth. That's one of the highest growth rates in the whole Europe and Central Asia region. To my mind, one of the great reasons of that is because of the very progressive policies that allows the private sector to thrive here in Georgia.
Yeah, and now looking at the current landscape of doing business, first because of pandemic and now because Russia's devastating war in Ukraine, and also these sanctions that are imposed on Russia, which is one of the the largest neighbors and also one of the largest enemies of this country. How do you think will these sanctions imposed on Russia in the long run be beneficial for Georgia in terms of diversity? As a booster for diversification of this of its market?
So first of all, I think one has to acknowledge Georgia has gone through a very series of shocks. First of all, the COVID-19 pandemic that has had a profound impact on Georgia, and now the current war in Ukraine and the sanctions regime that is imposed against Russia. I think all countries surrounding Russia right now are seeing their economies contract. We are downgrading almost all of the growth projections that we have had for all the countries, again, in the former CIS. Now, with that said, the first quarter here in Georgia has seen some very impressive growth. So we at the bank, in fact, will probably upgrade our growth projections sometime in June, because the Georgian economy has in fact shown itself to be very, very resilient. So growth has been over 10%. Even if we assume 0% growth for the last 3 quarters, we anticipate growth will be above 3%, which again is very, very strong, and it could even increase because I think it's going to be more than 0% over the last 3 quarters. So overall, again, Georgia's economy has been battle tested, I think has withstood the test of time, and I think that with sound government policies, we will see strong growth for this year as well.
And the focus on market diversification, because right now, for example, we had this competition agency report. I don't know if you have seen it yet, and they are saying that in order for the fuel prices to be decreased in Georgia, one market to look for is Russian market.
So look, I think one has to recognize Georgia is a small country and hence a small economy. It is as such vital for Georgia to be integrated with its neighbors. Now, I think it is prudent policy to have a sound strategy of diversification. That means we're trading with its partners here in the South Caucasus. That means trading with Turkey. That means trading with the European Union and China. Fortunately, Georgia has a number of trade deals already in place. And so as a result, I think it is a sound strategy to be as diversified as possible, in particular as one country, such as Russia right now, is going through a sanctions regime and where trading is going to prove to be more difficult.
This optimism with the economic growth and also the emphasis on the diversification of markets is shared by the government of Georgia. What the Austrian business community heard from the Minister of Economy, Levan Davitashvili, was this.
After the economic contraction by 6.8% in 2020, last year, Georgian economic recovery has gained surprising momentum, and growth amounted 10.4%. Of real GDP growth, and real GDP actually exceeded pre-pandemic level by 2.9%. However, war between Russia and Ukraine is significantly slowing down economic recovery trends globally. Despite challenging environment, promising trends continued in Georgia's economy. In 2022, we see that March and April figures are promising. Based on preliminary estimates, economic growth in January-March was around 14.4%, which is very impressive double-digit growth figure. In January-April 2022, export decreased by 32.8%, so it's also a very impressive figure, and amounted to $587 billion US. Recovery rate in tourist revenues is also as it's been planned during the actual beginning of this year. We have 70% of recovery of tourist revenues up to now, and 50% of number of travelers in 2022 compared to 2019 level, which was actually historic peak in Georgia's tourism industry. The growing global uncertainty in the wake of Russia and Ukraine war is of course a significant challenge for the global economy, including of course Georgia's economy, and since Ukraine and Russia both are important partners in trade and important source of our foreign currency inflows, we assume that that would affect of course income on Georgian economy. However, based on already observed promising tendencies, we expect that economic growth in Georgia in 2023 will still perform over IFI's projection. We are focusing on our economic policy agenda on maintaining macroeconomic stability and, of course, strengthening medium-term growth potential. And according to IMF, Georgia will ensure fastest economic growth in the region in medium term. In 2022-2027, among regional and European countries, we will have highest economic growth. It will be 5.5%, which will be supported by, of course, infrastructural spending, FDI inflows, structural reforms, and of course our focus on increasing productivity. Despite this significant progress and successfully implemented economic policy reforms, significant challenges still remain, which of course shall be addressed from our side. And in order to advance the country's economic performance and potential of economic growth, we should be mobilized and focused on our growth agenda. In order to decline external imbalances, government intends to widen Georgia's export base, diversify its export geography. Of course, foreign investment inflows are very important. We have to decrease dependence on Russian export and trade with Russia. Improve private sector competitiveness is very important, and of course we need to strengthen trade integration, and this is always priority for Georgia's government. Utilize Georgia's potential as a transit hub is very important, especially we see increased interest in so-called mid-corridor after Russian-Ukraine war.
Diversification from Russia's market is high on the agenda of every single respondent that I have talked to during the Austria-Georgia Business Forum. As you can hear in a few seconds, everyone is anticipating that in the long run, the international sanctions imposed on Russia will play as a booster for more market diversification and more economic independence from Russia.
I want to demonstrate our support to Ukraine, first of all. It had a very big impact on the Black Sea coast. So this particular event, and when we're looking forward to diversification of markets, finding business partners, this can have and will have very significant impact, especially when we're talking about, as I said, the hydroelectric power sector and renewable energy. Also here represented business process outsourcing companies that are looking forward to find operators in Georgia. And here one of the biggest requests is English language. So I think this will further promote high-skilled workers in Georgia that could potentially find work outside of Georgia while still remaining, this intellectual property will remain in Georgia. Also we have the tourism sector, which is quite significant. And one of the things I want to highlight, this business mission was first in Azerbaijan, now in Georgia. So there is interesting linkages between our countries, which could serve as a gateway to Europe. Georgia is traditionally, between Europe and Asia. So maybe we could find very interesting linkages between our three countries. And this could also, of course, impact overall business outlook. It's time for Georgian business, and after association agreement, it was a very big kick for Georgian business to look outwards of their traditional markets. And as a Chamber of Commerce, we say the key to Georgian business development is market diversification. It's European markets, stable markets, and many Georgian companies that already found business partners abroad or are conducting their business jointly, they serve as best practices of how can you become independent of external factors, especially when you have a war in Ukraine. This could boost additional interest into European market as a stable market and outlook to the future, I would say.
Considering this Russia's devastating war in Ukraine, considering the international sanctions that are mounting on Russia, and we know that economic sanctions work both ways. So if we look in the long run, would it be more challenges for Europe and Georgia? I mean Georgia with Europe, of course, or could it become a booster also for more economic diversification, for more diversification?
Well, first of all, this terrible war and all the tragedies which we're seeing now in the Ukraine is, of course, not really a catastrophe. But if we see that the companies are looking to do something, they have to look for other possibilities, and we can already see that, for example, trade, there's more trade going through Georgia and on the middle Silk Road, as we already heard, and the companies are saying, yes, this is happening. And we can also see, yes, they're trying to diversify, they're trying to look for new opportunities, and they're coming to Georgia and to see what can we do here if it's not possible in other countries. And so I think if they find good opportunities here, then they will stay here also. So that's why, yes, I'm quite sure that this is an opportunity for all the other countries, unfortunately, because of these tragic things which are happening, that this could develop here.
Another robust focus of Georgia's government, as the Minister of Economy assured the Austrian business community on the Business Forum, is on FDI and other institutional developments.
We support FDIs, and seeking FDIs remains one of top priorities for the government of Georgia. Production of electronics, auto and aircraft parts, pharmaceuticals, MRO, food processing, BPO, energy, ICT and logistics. These are considered as attractive sectors for FDIs with high growth potential and, of course, main source of export promotion and productivity enhancement. Georgia is one of few countries in the region with the institutions and policies and business climate that have transported the country into the new regional frontier for investment opportunities. Georgia has been ranked 8th place by OECD FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index. Georgia's FDI to GDP and FDI per capita is among the highest in the region and highest in European countries. On average, it's 6% of GDP in last 3 years. This is one of the highest among peers, like with the same sovereign rating. Georgia has a launch state program. This is FDI grant to support efficiency-seeking FDIs inflows to the country by co-financing qualified expenses upon the fulfillment of investment obligations. This is 1 million investment grant. Besides new incentives for IT sector, of course, increase potential of investments in IT sector. This is decreased income tax and profit tax to 5%. Of course, this can attract international IT corporations or Georgian market, and we definitely see increased interest from IT community in Georgia, and this is, of course, fundamental for our digital development process. As regards investments, let me reiterate that strong interest of Georgian government is inviting more Austrian companies and, of course, Austrian investments in our country. FDIs from Austria into Georgian economy in 2021 was not very high figure, but there is higher potential. It was around $6 million and since 1997, FDIs from Austria amounted $360 million and there we see bigger potential of attracting investments from Austria.
Levan Davitashvili highlighted the energy sector as one of the priorities of the government to develop in Georgia and welcomed any investor activity in the sector.
We consider 2 flagship projects with the European Union. This is Black Sea submarine cable for data connectivity. Plus, we consider important flagship project, direct electricity connectivity with Romania that will, of course, boost energy, especially renewable energy generation in our country. And, of course, these are also incentives for investors to consider energy sector as one of the priorities. Of course, it's very important for us when we talk about electricity to reduce dependence on neighbor countries and, of course, increase resilience. Government will consider potential investments to further strengthen energy independence in a fiscally sustainable manner. We are in the process of negotiating with our international financial institutions, with our friends and colleagues, new measures to promote additional investments in renewable energy generation. We are committed to strengthen our role as the EU reliable energy transit partner, supplier of green energy and key actor of transport tax system.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.